Morning, everybody. Today, I want to talk to you guys about climate and climate change. This lesson is not going to be too terribly long. Eighth graders, we talked a lot about the different types of climate last year when we talked about biomes. Seventh graders, we're going to be talking about climate next year when we're talking about biomes. So, what is the climate? I said last week that climate is the average long-term weather of an area or a region. The average long-term weather in an area or a region. So we might say the climate of New England is temperate, where the summers are warm and the winters are cold. Or the climate of a desert is little to no rain. Climate can be dependent upon the latitude of where you're located. This means how close to the equator. Latitude. So how close to the equator are you? Wow. So here's our globe. The equator is a line that separates the northern hemisphere from the southern hemisphere, and the latitude lines are circles that go north or south. These are the latitude lines. And the lines that go north to south that we draw to create a grid, these are the longitude lines. TUDE. These are the longitude lines. So latitude tells how close to the equator you are. Something else that your climate is going to be dependent upon is elevation. We talked about, when we were talking about the layers of the atmosphere, for the troposphere, your height above sea level, as you increase your height, your temperature decreases. So your elevation is your height above sea level. And the temperature decreases about 6.5 degrees Celsius for every kilometer you go up in elevation. And for those of you who think solely in Fahrenheit, that's about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1,000 feet. So every 1,000 feet you go up, your temperature decreases almost 4 degrees Fahrenheit. How close you are to the water will also affect your climate. We said that water takes longer to heat up. So coastal areas have a more consistent temperature. If you live near the mountains, depending on which side of the mountain you were on. We talked about this with airflow. So if you live on a mountain, the higher up the mountain you live, the colder it's going to be. If you live on one side of the mountain, you might be in a really rainy area. And if you live on the leeward side of the mountain, you might be in a really dry climate. So mountains affect air. They affect airflow. And there's going to be more rain on the windward side. And something else that's going to affect your climate is whether or not you live in a big city. Cities are mostly stone and concrete, and cities can be about 5 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding countryside. So the more plants there are, the cooler the surrounding air is going to be. We said concrete has a very low specific heat, so it doesn't take a lot of sun for that to heat up. And so the sun heats up the concrete, the sun and the concrete then heat up the surrounding air in a city. So cities can be pretty hot compared to their surrounding countryside. So, climate change. Try and get that out of the picture. Climate change, why do we care? Why is it important? Our climate is the weather over a long period of time. It's the average weather over a long period of time. And the climate has changed naturally. So climate change has occurred several times throughout the history of the Earth. So climate change has occurred in the past. Whoa. Sorry, there's a little lag through. So why are we worried now? Well, several things have contributed to climate change historically. First thing is atmospheric particles. We talked about this a little bit when we were talking about the atmosphere. Atmospheric particles are solids and liquids, usually water. These are solid and liquid particles. that increase cloud cover. And they come from natural sources like wildfire or volcano and human. So our pollution and our burning. So they are natural sources and human sources. Solar radiation contributes to climate change. So the sun will fluctuate. How much energy it's putting out. And this is something that we don't have any control over. It is a natural process. And another factor that can change your climate is the Earth's movement. We talked about this when we were talking about the Earth's rotation. The Earth wobbles. Back and forth, 23.5 degrees on its axis. So you might have noticed our climate is slowly changing right now as the northern hemisphere is tilting back towards the sun, and we get spring and summer. How is our climate changing? Our days are getting longer and the weather is getting warmer. These three things we have some control over, but most of them are natural processes and they occur whether we are here or not. But the biggest contributor to climate change is greenhouse gases. We talked about when we were doing the city build back in January that there are some gases, in particular carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, that are part of the natural carbon cycle. Since all life on the planet are carbon-based life forms, carbon goes through its own cycle, and both carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide help trap the sun's heat and warm the planet. So they definitely have been very useful to life existing on this planet. However, since the Industrial Revolution, so since the 18th century, Revolution, carbon dioxide levels have increased. Well beyond historic levels. Fossil fuels, which is our gas and our oil and our coal, and we talked about how here in the United States, the majority of our electricity comes from coal burning plants. Fossil fuels take hundreds of millions of years to form. What this means is carbon that is being released from the burning of these fuels is not cycling fast enough. So it's not being absorbed fast enough. Think about burning of the fossil fuels as being running water and it's filling up a bathtub. The carbon cycle would drain that carbon from the bathtub. And we're filling the tub up so fast that the drain isn't draining the carbon. What is ultimately happening? The more CO2 and carbon monoxide that is in the air is causing the air to be warmer, right? We talked about how warm air is going to warm our waters. It's going to cause more evaporation. And our ice caps melting. Which is going to trigger more severe weather events. So here in New England, we are still going to get snow in the wintertime because even if the average temperature goes up a couple of degrees, yeah, we'll have warmer winters, but we still get pretty cold. And so when we do get our storms, it's not going to be a couple of inches of snow. That's when we start getting blizzards, or that's where we start seeing more coastal flooding, or that's where we see a more severe hurricane season. So that is why scientists are worried. fast enough. Not being, there we go. Anyway, that is all I'm going to say today about climate and climate change. Tomorrow I'm going to start our simple machines, and I hope you guys really enjoy that unit. Thanks.